We went on the tour because the Reformation is probably the most significant event of the last 1,000 years. The teaching, the preaching of the Reformation literally changed the world.
The Reformers wanted to see the light of the gospel shine in the darkness of the world that they were living in. And the context of their world was really dark, and they wanted to just simply unleash the word and give it to the people.
I would always encourage anyone to do any kind of theologically based travel if they can. Understanding accurate history and the doctrinal issues that drove those events is really terribly important. The Reformation gave us an impetus for our political system. The whole idea of freedom, it gave us an impetus for our educational system. The international banking trade was founded in Geneva during the time of Calvin because he released this ability to raise capital and to work. Even the whole idea of capitalism was founded there. So you'd go through a whole string of events that were really spawned by the Reformation that really made our country even the country that it is, because they came out of the Reformation ideas.
So we began our trip by flying to Rome, which is our first stop, and we did that for at least a couple different reasons, one of which mainly was just because that was the context into which the Reformation was born.
For the previous 1,000 years, from, even more than that, from around the year 400 to 500, let's say, until the 16th century, the Catholic Church, theologically and even culturally, is the institution that dominated Europe. And when you go to Rome, terribly interesting because you see some of the same things that spawned Luther's thoughts about why he wanted to reform the church. For instance, going to the Church of the Holy Stairs is now encapsulated and it's covered. When Luther was there, I believe the staircase was just outside. But Luther went and saw people climbing these stairs on their hands and knees, one at a time, thinking that somehow they get to the top and that buys them time out of purgatory because of what they've done. To go there and see people continuing to do that is just, it's amazing and it's alarming that is still being propagated. So you have to go to Rome first and see the Vatican and see why Luther looked at that and said, this is not true religion. It's religion, but it's not biblical.
Everything in the world at that point centered on Rome, and even going back before the medieval period, where the Roman Catholic Church was the epicenter of all the European world, at least, and some people would say the known world. Even before all of that, back to the early church, Rome just has some amazing places where you can sit and just stand in the middle of the Roman Forum. And around the corner is the Mamertine prison, and where Paul and I think Peter were in prison right before their martyrdom, and where some of the New Testament books we have today were penned right there where we were standing. And as you move up to the Colosseum and recognize that so many of our brothers and sisters were paying the ultimate price for the faith that we believe in, and standing there and just thinking about that, and then moving around Rome to some other places as well, really made it a great place to start for the ancient Roman context, and then again the Reformation or medieval period Roman context with the Roman Catholic Church. The next day we had a great time with our host, Fred Whitman, going to the catacombs, and that was another highlight too. That Sunday, worshiping in the catacombs as we walked through, had the tour, and then ended there with communion. What a sweet time that was. We sang songs, Pastor John shared something from the Word, and then Brett administered the Lord's Supper. It just was a great time. And then we moved on to Geneva, where we were in Geneva, Switzerland for 2 days because of John Calvin and his influence with the Reformation. That city is just a glisteningly beautiful city. It's just beautiful. And then, of course, the Reformation history on top of it with John Calvin. One of the main highlights of the trip for most people was just being able to worship at the church there with Pastor John Glass on that Sunday morning, and Pastor John being able to preach. That was a real highlight, I think, for folks on the trip, and an unexpected one, too. We moved on after a couple days there up to Germany. We were there for 2.5 days, where we started in Berlin, and we drove around the city and saw some of the World War II German highlights there with the Berlin Wall and the Reichstag building and all the rest of it. Then we took 2.5 days to drive basically across the country to see some of the Luther sites in Wittenberg, and then again at the Wartburg Castle and Erfurt, and then driving down to Frankfurt to end so that we could fly out from Frankfurt up to London. Well, we were introduced to the English Reformation, and there's so much more to see than what we could see in those 2.5 days there, but we did get a chance to see some significant sites. And really that starts to move a little bit closer to home for us as American Americans in our church context here, because so much of what we have here really kind of derived out of Europe from England. And so it was significant for us to spend that time up there. And then for some of us, we moved on to Scotland and got a chance to hear and learn more about the Scottish Reformation, which was significant in a lot of ways. And so we really were blessed by that time too. So altogether, 2 weeks, 5 different places and countries. And I think by the time we were done, we felt like we didn't leave a whole lot of stones unturned. We were very, very tired, but hopefully, and I think we were very, very blessed.
I loved doing the Reformation tour. It was a great experience for me personally. I would love, it's the kind of thing, I'd love to have every one of my kids go on it. I'd love to have everyone in our church go on it.
I think a trip like this really helps you join arms with other people down through history. These people had just this enormous view of God and His glory, and they derived that directly from the scriptures. And we saw a sense of that, captured a sense of that, and want to pass that along.
This is not a historical tour, ultimately. You do study history. We're tourists, but it's not just to be a tourist. The value of something like this is to drive us back to the biblical truth about God's eternal plan of salvation and what that means for us personally, how that impacts us in the church.
I really wanted people to walk away from this trip with an increased love for Christ and increased love for His church.